Hi, fellow trumpet slaves. Thank you for joining me again today. This is number 45 in the Melodious Etudes for Trumpet book. These are taken from Marco Bordogni's Vocalises. And I think if you've been enjoying them with me, you'll recognize, I hope, that these are some of the nicest little tunes that you can find to use as exercises. Now, I mentioned in the last etude, I'm a little under the weather today, so if I sneeze or cough or my nose drips as I'm playing or whatever, try and ignore that and just stay involved in the music. That's what I'm going to try and do. So, what's this one all about? Well, we don't know until we try and play it, but the first thing I do is I look at it and see if I can feel what seems to be the right tempo. Now, there's a suggested tempo here, but that's not a law. That's the editors of this collection made a decision that that's what they felt the tempo was. On the particular day that whoever made the decision made it, they said, oh yeah, this is 48 to the dotted quarter note. So, and it's in 6/8. Now, I'm going to play 48 for you on my metronome. So that's not a bad tempo. How do I know? Well, I want to go a little bit faster, but then I know I always want to go a little bit faster. Some people tend to drag, probably more people tend to rush. But what you all want to do, regardless of our natural tendency, is see if I can find that groove, especially with a 3 feel, like the 6/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. You want to feel like you can get into the flow and stay kind of in that movement, because music is about movement. It's expressing movement with sound. So I'm going to play this. I don't know if I'll get all the way through it. These are getting longer, as I mentioned previously, and they have various challenges. So we'll see what we can do today, but I'll try and give you a good performance. Here we're going at the top. Okay, well it is what it is. And I'll see if I can get that feeling. that wasn't fun for me. And this should be fun. So I'm looking for, fun's too light a word, I'm looking for satisfaction. And musically, I'm a pretty difficult person to satisfy because I've been spoiled by listening to some of the greatest players in the world and playing with them. And so I have a pretty good sense of whether things are sublime or whether they're just okay. And this is something that I want you to try and develop. Now, I was struggling physically most of the way through. I'm sure you could probably tell that at the end, because I started to lose my concentration. I'm thinking, well, should I stop now? I got a lot to say. I want to talk about this and that, so I'm doing several things at once. That's not a performance. If I'm going to play this for you, I should probably do a performance. But that was what it was. So that's our starting point. Now, what didn't I like? Well, I started to get a little bit tight to try and control things, and I felt it happening, but I was thinking about so many things. I bet that many of you out there are in the same situation, especially when you're playing an etude that's so slow and is not too technically complicated. You have too much time to think, and you shouldn't be thinking. You should be immersed in the movement of the music, and you should be flowing someplace, and you should hear where you're flowing to. When you do that and you fight for that staying in the music, then it makes it much, much easier to play. Now, I find that playing solo material like this, it's more difficult to do that. And when you're playing with other people, it's much easier because it's relational and it's interactive. My wife is a professional accompanist, and she loves what she does because she gets to work with so many wonderful players. And everything from very young players up to the greatest soloists in the world. She's gotten to work with all of them. And it's wonderful because it's relational. So what do we get to relate to if we're playing a solo? Well, unfortunately, I have myself to relate to. That's a big problem. But when it comes down to it, I try and see the music as simply as possible. And when I can stay in that musical line, in that thought that goes through, especially between phrases, over rests, or when I'm sustaining notes, then everything goes better. Now, there are a lot of ways to do this, and you probably, if you're an experienced player, you know what works for you. And that's what we're all trying to find, what works for you. Well, I'll give you a suggestion that works for me. I don't think as much about the individual notes as I do about the landing points, you might say. So if I play the first phrase, so that would be a simple outline of what's actually happening there. And I think you might even be able to hear me. Ya, dee, da, da, dee, da. You can hear me play a shape. So there's an increase of intensity, it's going someplace, and then it's releasing. And that is the basis of all music, but especially lyrical music. It's very obvious. So if I think not of da-da, da-da, dee, da-da, dee, da-da-da, which is what our fingers are doing, and they need to do that very intentionally. But our breath is just following that line. Now, there's several things that make a line. Rhythmic things help to form the line. Articulations can help to form the line. Certainly changes in pitch help form the line, and in dynamics, but harmony is also an essential ingredient. So in the first bar, there's pretty much nothing happening. It's one harmony. Where does the harmony change? That's what I want you to listen for. Follow the harmonic progression. Now, if some of you out there are improvisational folks, maybe have some experience with jazz improvisation, for example, you're going to be hearing harmonically. If some of you are keyboard players, for example, or guitar players, you're going to be probably thinking more harmonically because you've been doing it. But most of us single note players, one note at a time players, are not thinking harmonically as strongly as we need to. And this is a taste you need to develop. So I'm going to play that first line again. So I could hear one chord change and then back to tonic again. Interesting. Huh. If you can hear that, it helps you to play better because then you're leading to the chord change and you're leading away from it. You notice how I did a crescendo? That was instinctive. It's not written in the music. Some people would say that's wrong because it's not written in the music. And I would say that's wrong. The music tells you what to do. What, did you hear the harmonic progression? I'm not going to talk theory here. Oh, we're in the same chord that we were in at the beginning. See, that could be the chord, but I don't know. What I do know is there's an opportunity for the harmony to change there, and it's leading back to our to home base, as it were. Now, if this stuff is boring to you, then maybe you should do something else, because for those of you who can taste the music, I'm just encouraging you to taste this. Now, it's interesting. There's so many things going on here, like the fact that it's a slow tempo. I didn't like that tempo. You see, I went a little faster because 48 just didn't feel right to me. It felt like it was being imposed. Now, here's a basic rule for you. If you have to perform something in an ensemble, let's say, with a conductor, a band or an orchestra, and you've practiced it, and you practiced it at a different tempo than the conductor is feeling it, it's always going to feel awkward to you to play it at their tempo. So you need to become very, very flexible. So I use this as an exercise, and I'm going to actually slow the tempo down. Oh, see, that would be really annoying, right? So, slow practice is not just to gain easier facility. You can slow things down to make them easier. In this case, I feel like it makes it more difficult, but it also makes it more obvious about what the musical line requires. You hear on the long notes, I have to carry those notes now. I'm warming them up with a little bit of vibrato. So it's a complete discovery process. I'm not telling you you should know this. I'm telling you you need to discover it for yourself. And you discover it mainly by listening to people who are doing it until you start to understand the language. The best way to learn a language, as many of you know, I'm an American, so I speak one language. And I think that's too bad. I wish that I spoke more, but I never got around to learning other languages. But I do speak the language of music, and that's the one that you need to be interested in, regardless of what your native language is. And we musicians can recognize each other because we understand the same language. Listen to people who understand the language. And that's the way you learn it. Just like if you're a child growing up in whichever culture, whichever country, you become acclimated to what's around you. So surround yourself with really good examples of this, especially singers, if you're working for this lyrical style. There are a lot of other ingredients in here, and I'll just give you one practice tip, and I find it really, really helpful. You may find it annoying. I've brought it up before, and I'm going to speed it up this time. Let's see. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tongue everything, except the grace notes. So here we go. So that's a great way to practice by comparing the sensation and the qualities of the sound when you're tonguing and when you're slurring. If you get a quality of sound that's, that has that ring to it and that feels very stable and simple, pleasurable, then you don't want that to change when you start articulating. So the next step I would do is I would start to tongue the subdivision. So this helps me when I'm playing very slowly. Let's see. Let's try to go that same tempo. So I'm going to be tonguing the 16th notes. Now, there are many different ways to tongue. And what most people do, and it's not wrong, it's not a problem, is they'll tongue very legato. So it's like, see, but that's not real articulation. That kind of articulation, according to his writings, drives Arbin crazy. What does he want? He wants a real separation between the notes, even if it's very, very instantaneous. So you want to make sure that's something to work for. So when you're doing that with your single tongue, see, there's no separation. And a lot of people have this problem. I just had one of my subscribers write and say, how do you do it the right way? You know, how do you get that clean attack? Of course, that's complicated because there are so many things going on physically, but it's also simple. If you have an airstream going, the airstream is completely constant. Even when the air is not moving, because the tongue has created a complete seal so the air cannot move, you're still following through, and your embouchure is still poised in order to receive that air. Everything stays the same as if you were still sustaining the note. Now there's another factor here that's really, really helpful. And this is more of a technical thing, and I want to get into this in more detail later, but if you can feel when you tongue, when you're flowing the air, that it's very even and very relaxed. And the tongue just works very, very lightly. Most trumpet players are doing more like this. So they're backing up the air, creating resistance, and holding the air with the tongue, and kind of leaking it a little bit. What you want is totally free air. That takes more breath control, and it takes more skill with the embouchure. If you just push the air and block it with the tongue, that gives you a very easy way to control the air. That's the way most trumpet players play. Even good trumpet players play like this. And it works as long as you can bring everything into balance. But for this light style, you need that to be thinking, am I pushing the air too hard? Am I flowing the air enough? Am I releasing it enough so that I can sustain that vibration in my lips as easily as possible? This is what you need for lyric playing. I'm going to share one more suggestion to you, and that is use K articulation. So now it gets a little bit more difficult for most players. So now I'm going, and I'm squeezing there with my tongue. And I hear my students say this over and over again. It feels like my tongue is sticking. It is. But finding the balance between your breath and your face and the resistance of the instrument and the support of the instrument when you're tonguing with the K is pretty challenging for most people. So if you're trying to work on your double and triple tongue, this is one of the best ways. I don't know any better way to work on it, because what you're trying to learn how to do is actually separate the notes. I'm not releasing completely. That means I have to touch very lightly with my tongue. Squeezing again. So this will be a challenge for you. It is for most players. When you can get better at this, your breath control improves and your response improves tremendously. And of course, your multiple tonguing improves. So I hope those tips help you. Even though that wasn't a great performance of the piece, I hope you got something out of this and can start applying it to your own practice and seeing some progress, because that's what makes practice fun. Okay, go and have fun. I'll see you later on. Bye-bye.